Our first topic is an overview of kinship care. So children and youth come into kinship care because their birth parents are unable to care for them due to mental or physical health issues, abuse of drugs and or alcohol, incarceration, and even death. Who are kinship caregivers? Our kinship caregivers are folks just like you and me. And they were just going about their regular routine when they got the call that nobody wants to get. A child that they care about was in crisis. And these are the individuals that answered that call and made a commitment to these children. Last month, in my role with Fairness, I moderated a webinar on reimaging family support services perspectives from kinship caregivers presented by Dr. Barbara Lee of UBC. One of the items she shared was data from the Statistics Canada 2021, confirming from the age of 0 to 24 that there were 10,415 persons living with one grandparent without parents in BC, and 23,370 persons living with other relatives not in the census families, for a total of 33,785 relatives in BC. This is a lot more kin living and raising relatives than we had seen in previous research.
Many grandparents or close family relatives are raising their children without any funding or contact from MCFD. It is hard to know how many kinship caregivers are in informal care arrangements. The numbers produced by data analysts and researchers sometimes seem to compare apples and oranges. 19 is the age. Youth are considered to have aged out, but as we all know, today's youth struggle to make enough to go out on their own. Therefore, stay in our homes longer than we did. With an informal agreement, the birth parents allow, ask, or cannot continue to care for their children themselves. The caregivers take over the responsibility of caring for the child's daily needs. The birth parent is still considered to have full parental rights. Some, but not all of these caregivers, may be receiving Canada Child Benefit. However, others are not. Though the Canada Revenue Agency does offer a few options for these caregivers to be able to provide information that proves that they are indeed caring for the child and therefore eligible for the Canada Child Benefit. I have heard anecdotally that they are afraid that the birth parents will take the children back if the parents no longer receive the CB themselves. These families are not eligible for MCFD financial or other benefits, and they are not eligible for the tuition waiver.
Okay, so this slide represents the MCFD out of care arrangements as of October 25th. So this slide shows the different out of care agreements, custody orders, and benefits. So if you look, there's the extended family program, intern custody order to person other than a parent, a temporary custody order to person other than a parent, permanent transfer of custody to a person other than a parent following an EFP, agreement or temporary custody order under 5401, and a permanent transfer of custody to a person other than a parent following a custody order under 54.1, and child in home of relative. So what we're going to do is we're going to break down some of these programs for you as we go through the course. The next slide is pathways. So this slide outlines MCFD's various streams and pathways for children who cannot remain with their parents and those who are already in care. So as you can see on the left-hand side shows the pathway for those who are not remaining in their parents' care, and the other one is child is already in care. So they are already in the care of MCFD. So what I wanted to share with you is because they use all these different kind of orders and stuff, I thought it would be important to share what they are. So an interim order generally refers to a short-term court order, which may be used to temporarily settle issues such as parenting arrangements or supports. A continuing custody order is an order under the CFCSA, making the Director of Child Protection the guardian of the child. A temporary custody order is an order under the Child, Family, and Community Service Act, making the Director of Child Protection the guardian of a child for a certain period of time. So that just kind of gives you a little overview of what those different things are.
The Child and Home of Relative program is really near to my heart, as it was the only program available to us when we took interim guardianship of our grandson, and MCFD stepped away before he was a year old. The CIHR program is closed to new applicants in 2010, but sometimes they provide but continues to provide a legacy support to approximately 100 families until the 2028-2029 financial year. CIHR is an orphan program. Even though MCFD took some responsibility for them prior to 2010, they left it under the Social Development and Poverty Reduction Ministry to pay out. Neither ministry lays any claim to it. Historically, CIHR offered modest monthly payments of $257 for a baby, and then up to a whopping $454 at the age of 18 until their 19th birthday. This was given to relatives caring for children outside of the foster care system, recognizing the additional cost of raising a relative's child. There was no other MCFD program prior to 2010 that was available to kinship families, other than to train to become a foster care parent or post-adoptive assistant. The advocacy by community organisations, including Fairness for Children Raised by Relatives, Parent Support Services Society, and the Representative for Child and Youth, led to a much-needed rate increase in 2023. The adjustment of $8,800 for children 14 to 17 and $8,200 on their 18th birthday which brought CIHR payments closer to the post-adoptive rates. Despite this progress, many families continue to face inequities, particularly those caring for children with special needs who require ongoing developmental and behavioural support. CIHR families, who are often seniors, are excluded from key benefits such as SAGE, which is a Support Assistance for Youth in Extended Care program, and disability supports through the new EOOC program, Extended Out of Care Support Program. This exclusion still creates a significant financial gap, sometimes exceeding $1,000 per month, compared to families supported by newer kinship care programs. CIHR families are usually in the formal-informal category. They have gone to court for custody or guardianship. Birth parents have lost all or some of their parenting rights. CIHR families can receive the Canada Child Benefit, the Canada Disability Benefit if eligible, and can get all federal, provincial, and municipal benefits that use the Canada Child Benefit as a requirement for assistance. Community-based organisations remain a vital resource for informal caregivers. Thankfully, youth in the CIHR program are eligible for tuition waivers, which support post-secondary education through provincial and post-secondary institutions. Okay, the Extended Family Program. This program provides support in situations when a parent through MCFD voluntarily authorizes a relative or close family friend to care for a child or youth when their parents are temporarily unable to care for them. It is considered temporary, and after 2 years, families are encouraged to transfer to MCFD's 5401 program. The caregiver has care of the child or youth is the kinship caregiver who signs a contract with MCFD every 6 months. MCFD do an in-person check-in with the child and family caregiver every 90 days after the report by RCY. Don't look away. Parents remain the personal and property guardian of the youth or child. The parent has a right to terminate and is authorized by the parent to exercise certain parental responsibilities, which means the EP is over and the caregiver cannot receive further funding. MCFD contributes to the support of the child and youth while in the care of the service provider. Okay. Financial compensation for EFP, ages 11 and under, $1,500 and $2.53 per month, and for ages 12 and older, $1,686.92 per month. The EFB provides medical, dental, and optical benefits through MCFD medical program if they're not covered elsewhere, including up to $700 a year for dental care. They have a daycare subsidy and surcharge which is available, and access to developmental supports such as complex developmental behavior conditions, assessment services for children with FASD or autism. If eligibility is met, EFP also has flexibility for respite, cultural activities, training, and transportation, depending on the child's needs. If the youth meet program requirements, they may be eligible for SAGE, dependent on the program eligibility, also EOOC, if they have significant special needs. The EFP children are eligible for the tuition waiver if they meet the 2-year minimum requirement. Federal benefits caregivers under EFP can apply for and receive the Canada Child Benefit and the Child Disability Benefit through the Canada Revenue Agency if eligible. They may be eligible for all other federal, provincial, and municipal benefits when this Canada Child Benefit is used as a necessary payment structure. Okay. The impact of transitioning from the Extended Family Program, the EFP, to the 5401 Permanent Guardianship Program is substantial. And we recommend that all kinship families talk to the PSS helpline to assess what that choice will mean for your children. I will be highlighting both the positive and negative aspects of kinship families. The positive impacts of transitioning. The shift to 5401 status provides more permanence to the child's living situation and greater independence from the Ministry of Children and Family Development. You are now the child or youth's legal guardian. The 5401 program reduces the frequency of required meetings and monitoring obligations. Some support programs for aging out of care, SAGE, and special needs, EOOC, may be inaccessible under the 5401 program if eligible is accessible under the 5401 if the eligibility is met. The youth in 5401 and 5401 are eligible for the tuition waiver if they meet the 2-year requirement. Now, the negative impacts of transitioning. The financial consequences. Families transitioning to 5401 programs face significant financial impacts, including the loss of eligibility for the Canada Child Benefit and other federal credits, which can result in losses of up to $13,000 per year per child. Loss of medical and support services. The transition eliminates access to extended medical coverage and federal dental programs, placing the financial burden of medical and dental expenses on caregivers. However, as usual, they don't tell you, but there is a chance of an exception. If a child's permanency needs are met through the continued use of EFP agreements, the EFP agreement may continue to be renewed. The EFP agreements can be used to support customary care arrangements as well.
Okay, now we're going to go on to the 54 permanent legal status program. So it's very important to understand that there's a distinction between the 5401 and the 5401. So I want to address that so you can understand it. So the section 5401 refers to transferring permanency to an individual, typically an extended family member, following a temporary custody order. And the other one, 54.1, refers to transferring a permanency to the director following a continuing custody order. So they're very different. So the responsibilities are care providers assume full parental responsibilities for the child or youth. Parents lose all parental responsibilities. MCFD continues to do the child support. Financial compensation can be between $1,500 and $2.53 a month for children's age 11 and under, $1,686.92 per month for children aged 12 and older. Additional funding may be available for children with disabilities or for daycare subsidies. Federal benefits. As Gail has alluded to, caregivers are not eligible for the Canada Child Benefit or Child Disability Benefit, but they may receive an equivalent amount if eligible for this one. This is due to a amendment to the Children's Special Allowance Act in 2011. Youth aging out. All youth are eligible for the Provincial Tuition Fee Waiver Program and the Learning Grant. MCFD SAGE program offers support to youth aged 19 to 26 who were in care between the ages of 12 and 19. This is very important to know because most of our kids that come into the 54 programs come in at a much earlier age. So it's only relevant if they come into the program at the age of 12 or more. Health benefits. Care providers are responsible for medical coverage. Children may qualify for programs like Healthy Kids if the care provider is eligible for MSP supplementary benefits. Supplementary support. Additional funding may be provided for startup fees, respite, child minding, cultural activities, transportation, and training. Community supports may be available based on need. And the Enhanced Out of Care Support Program, which is a program that provides wraparound support for children with significant and complex needs. Again, this would have to apply for this one. Okay, the next one we're going to talk about is post-adoption assistance. Post-adoption assistance supports BC's families who adopt children with special needs or other placement challenges. It focuses on easing financial pressures and setting clear legal procedures for ongoing support. This program also provides access to service that assist and support adoptive parents, a capacity for care for their adopted child and youth when needed. MCFD adoption workers must refer to the post-adoption assistance provisional policy and procedures to guide and to direct their adoption practices. A child or youth must be formally designated as having a special service need or a special placement need or both in order to apply for PAA. A child and youth is designated by their guardianship worker and team leader prior to placement for adoption. Criteria are regulated by the Adoption Act. When a caregiver proposes to adopt a child or youth they have been providing care for, they can apply for PAA once the notice of placement date is known and or the child or youth has completed the 6-month period, which is known as on residency. This begins when the child and youth is placed for adoption in the home of their prospective adoptive parent per the Adoption Act and following the adoption order being made. The adoption order is applied for by the social worker to the Supreme Court, and this process may take 3 to 6 months. The adoption order is the adoption worker or guardianship worker must notify the resource worker when the caregiver proposes to adopt a child or youth. PAA applicants cannot receive both foster care payments and PAA payments for the child or youth on the adoption residency. Assistance is granted through the signed agreement between the adoptive parent and the ministry's provincial director of adoption. 2 main types of financial support are offered. The maintenance payments, these are the monthly support for daily childcare costs up to from $850 to $1,100 per month, depending on the age and the family income. Support service payments help with therapy, counseling, medical needs, tutoring, or respite care when it's not covered by public programs. However, it should be noted that the adoptive parents are responsible for their child and youth medical. Families qualify if their net income is under $80,000. This is prorated depending upon income and number of children. And also, assets must be below $300,000. This is excluding the primary home and pensions. However, if the pensions are accessed, those funds must be included as well. Agreements are reviewed every 2 years with the pre-approval required for any payment starts. Should a need arise during the 2 years of the agreement, the adopted caregiver needs to contact their adoption worker to apply for coverage right away, such as a change in medications and costs have increased. Payments will not be and cannot be backdated and service funded elsewhere, like through the Child and Youth and Special Needs Program, cannot be double claimed. Agreements end when the child turns 19, becomes independent, or re-enters care. It should be noted that the post-adoption assistance is not considered an out-of-care program, and therefore that is why it was not included in our MCFD pathways slide. However, the pathway for post-adoptive assistance is from a continuing custody order to foster care. And it is now my pleasure to introduce a video from my close friend Joanne, who will share more on this topic.
Hi, my name's Joanne, and I've been asked to talk a little bit about the post-adoption assistance. I have an adopted daughter who is my relative's son. So my cousin is her birth father, and I've had her since she was 6 months old. So I first found out about her at a family conference that I got invited to by my aunt, and she asked me if I'd foster while her child got clean. Turns out that my cousin had met this woman in a drug and alcohol treatment center, and that neither of them actually got clean, that he thought he'd paid for the baby to be terminated, but that didn't happen. And so she had used drugs and it turns out alcohol through her whole pregnancy. So I went to the family conference, that was done by a private agency and was attended by all of the family on both sides and a social worker from the ministry. By noon, the ministry social worker had pulled me aside, advised me that they weren't going to be placing the baby with any of the adopted family, basic family, like the parents or the parents itself, grandparents, that the only option at this point that the baby Riley had was to be placed with me, either under the Family Relations Act or as a foster to adopt. Because I worked for the Ministry of Social Services, I knew I did not want to have placement under the Family Relations Act. The funding was very little at the time, and there was lots of disabilities that I could see happening. And also that I'd offered to foster up to 2 years, and that wasn't accepted. So if there was a placement longer than 2 years, it would break my heart to have the child pulled out of my home. If I'm going to have her that long or the baby that long, then it has to be forever. So I said no. So before I left the conference that day, the social worker that was a non-ministry social worker, he approached me. He told me that if I did decide to do the adopting, that I should ask for post-adoption assistance. Turns out he used to be a ministry social worker and went private. So he said the funding should be offered up front, but it not always is. So what I should do is just wait until the adoption process is well underway, and then near the end, very end, ask for the post-adoption or ask where the post-adoption funding is. So that's exactly what ended up happening. So I came home from the conference, asked my daughter, who at that point was 10 years old, how she thought about having a new baby, promised her some promises that I did manage to keep about still letting her do what she was doing, etc. Because I was a single parent at the time, 45 years old. So having a new baby was definitely going to be a challenge for me, for energy level, having a 10-year-old who danced like crazy. So we talked to a lawyer, everything worked out. We advised the ministry that we were going to adopt. So that's what we did. So the conference is in November. All the paperwork and the process that goes into doing a foster placement, I did not actually receive Riley until the end of January. So at that point, Riley was 6 months old and 9 pounds. She was born at 3/6, 10 weeks early. So when I got her, she came with her fair amount of problems right away. So she had torticollis, couldn't turn her head to the left at all. Her body on the left-hand side had seized up. So 6 months of physiotherapy for that. She also had internal problems where she wasn't keeping her formula down or in at the bottom. Everything was very explosive. So we ended up switching her over to a new formula and, working with attachment disorder. because she wasn't attaching, would not take a hug. So the only way we could get a hug in with her, body to body contact, was to turn her facing away from us and then put her up against us. It was interesting. It was very challenging. So the ministry social worker who came to check on us once we got settled here, because they were from 100 Mile, and now down here, the ministry social worker came and talked to me, and she said up in 100 Mile they were giving an infant development helper, and would I be willing to or want to have her? And I said, of course I would. Yes, definitely. Number one, I don't know nothing about dealing with a child with the kind of special needs that this child has. I knew the results of not dealing with it, or the adult results, but not the child results. So yes, definitely. And I also knew that the ministry very rarely gets the opportunity to offer things to you. And when they do, that you should take them, because they don't get to very often. So I said, yes, definitely. We have worked with the ministry infant development workers from the time she was 6 months to the time she was 3. And it was fabulous. So sometimes once a week, sometimes twice a month, but it was wonderful. So we still work with the same agency to this day, not the same kind of ministry funded one, but parent drop-ins. So for parent groups and child groups, either while the parents were there with the daycare or during education things for children with fetal alcohol or drug attachments. So, yeah. So we basically got to the point where the ministry was ready with the paperwork for the adoption after 3 months with foster. And during that meeting, I asked where in the paperwork was the information on the post-adoption funding. And so the ministry had not included anything in that. There was no funding in the paperwork for post-adoption. So I knew the social worker personally because of working with social services at the time. And so, she said, oh, geez, I should have realized that you needed the funding, but we don't have it in here. So the ministry had to send it back up through the channels to get approved for the funding and then back down. So that took about a month to happen. And then we finally signed the post-adoption paperwork. So, So since the adoption, she has had 2 assessments done, which the ministry has paid for. One when she was 2 and again when she was almost 6. She's got diagnosis of 13 different things now. At 3, she was diagnosed with fetal alcohol, ADHD, oppositional defiance, sensory disorder, and now she has others put in other disorders. We have worked with counselors. We have worked with physiotherapists. We have worked with occupational therapists, all which we had to get approval for with the ministry. I love my daughter to bits, but thank goodness the ministry was there with the funding through post-adoption to help us. Thank you very much. Hopefully this helps you out.
So section 2 is going to be more of the legal side of it. So it's going to be dry, just so you know. We'll try and go slowly and breathe into it, and hopefully it will be helpful for you. So I'm going to talk to you about the Child and Family Community Services Act, or the CFCSA. That's the law in British Columbia that guides how the Ministry of Children and Family Development, MCFD, protects and supports children and youth. In plain language, it says this: the children have the right to be safe, cared for, and respected. Families have the main job of raising their children, and government only steps in when a child's safety or well-being might be at risk. So when this happens, social workers use the CFCSA to decide what kind of help or protection is needed. The goal is always to keep the children with their families whenever it's safe, and if that's not possible, to place them with extended family or close friends who already know them and care for them. That's where kinship caregivers like you all come in. This law is what allows relatives to care for a child through things like temporary care agreements, extended family placements, or guardianship orders. It also helps set out what the rights you and the child have and how decisions about the child's care are made. The heart of this law is about partnership. Families, communities, and the ministry working together to make sure every child grows up feeling loved, safe, and connected to who they are and where they come from. So when you hear the CFCSA, think of it as a rule book for child protection, but also as a bridge that helps families and relatives come together to care for kids when they need us most. Now, the other one is the Family Law Act. This is the law in British Columbia that deals with family relationships, parenting, and decision making for children. It covers things like guardianship, parenting time, contact, and child support. Once again, in plain language, the Family Law Act focuses on what's best for the child. Every decision, whether it's made by the parents, relatives, or the court, has to put the child's safety and emotional well-being, stability first. For kinship caregivers, this law is especially important. It is what allows you to become a guardian or to have parenting responsibilities when you're caring for a relative's child. It also helps outline who makes decisions about healthcare, schooling, and cultural or family connections. So you may ask, how is this different from the Child and Family Community Service Act? Well, the difference is the CFCSA is about child protection. It's used when the Ministry of Children and Family Development steps in because there's a concern about the child's safety or well-being. The Family Law Act is also about family arrangements and decision making. It's used when families are sorting out who cares for a child, how the time is shared, and what the child's needs are moving forward. So the CFCSA is what's used when the government needs to act to keep a child safe, and the Family Law Act is what families and caregivers use to create stable and long-term plans for caring for a child once things are more settled. Both laws aimed for the same big goal, to make sure every child grows up safe, loved, and connected to their family and community. So when you hear the Family Law Act, think of it as a guidebook of how families make care decisions, while the CFCSA is the rule book for protecting children when safety concerns arise.
Okay, now I would like to acknowledge that the following 3 slides are excerpts taken from a 9-page, really comprehensive MCFD comparison of out of care and permanency options document. The purpose of this document is as a tool for workers and was current as of September 2023 and may not reflect any changes made since then. However, this is the most updated version we could find to assist us with the understanding of the processing of legal implication of orders and agreements. So this full document can be viewed at the URL below. And I do believe we've added this to our bibliography. I very much would tell you when you have a lot of time, because it is very intensive and there are a lot of tables, but there is a lot of really good information in there. And I would recommend having a look at it. So we're just going to focus on these excerpts for now. So the first table, we can go. The first table, we're going to talk about independent legal advice in court. So these sections, as you can see under independent legal advice, there is not any independent legal advice through MCFD for the EFP program, the temporary out of care orders, or guardian applications under CFCSA custody order. However, there is free advice for the child and youth and proposed guardianships through MCFD, so through the 5401, 54.1. When we look at the court process, EFP is the only one where there is no court process. For the arrangements, it is generally the director who makes application to the court. with the exception of when a person other than a director makes an application for guardianship under the Family Law Act, which can happen at any time. So we really want to stress to you and to any especially new caregivers that are coming on board, please do not go to the lawyer or please do not go to court and get guardianship without first looking at what the options are. Because once you go get that guardianship, you are not entitled, your child or children are not entitled to any benefits from MCFD. So it's really critical that you consider this. Okay, so now we'll go on to slide 2. Slide 2, this slide outlines the duration of the legal relationship. So I wanted to share on this particular one something when Gail was talking about the EFE program. I wanted to share that related to permanency, I found these statements very interesting because they support the fact that you can maybe get EFP longer than 2 years. So for some of our members and others that we've talked to and we've heard from in different formats and in different places, they've told us that there's been pressure applied to them to get off of the EFP after 2 years and get onto the 5401. So I wanted to bring your attention to the permanency transfer of custody under 5401, where it states, however, if a child's permanency needs are met through continued use of EFP, the EFP agreement may continue to be renewed in this way. EFP agreements can also be used to support customary care arrangements. So this is kind of to let you know that even though they're saying that and you're worried about the pressure that's being applied, you can say to them, hey, what about, and you can quote this, you know, if it's working, why can't we continue to do it? Okay, so that's table 2. Table 3, this provides information on access. So for the extended family plan, there needs to be agreement with parents. And so you must ensure you're confident that the parents will not decide to end the agreement. For if they do, the child in your care will not be eligible for any future benefits from MCFD. For temporary orders, it's up to the director to outline access through a supervision order. For those in permanency 54 streams, the guardians are responsible to assess what contact with birth parents is appropriate, unless otherwise stated in an access order. Noting that parents may seek access as application for contact under the Family Law Act. In the case of adoption, there may be an openness agreement, ideally negotiated by the director before the adoption order is granted. However, adoption agreements are not legally binding. Birth parents, once again, may seek access through an application for contact through the Family Law Act once the adoption order is granted. And now we will go on to legal definition of terms in child welfare. Next slide.
So guardianship through the legislation, Child and Family and Community Service Act defines guardianship as including all the rights, duties, and responsibilities of a parent. Meanwhile, in the Family Law Act, defines a guardian as someone recognized under Section 39, parents are generally guardians, a person with custody under Section 5401 and 5401 of the CSA Act is deemed to be an appointed guardian under the Family Law Act. Okay, so what does this mean? When parents live together, both are guardians, whether they're married or not. If parents separate, both remain guardians unless a court orders otherwise. Anyone who isn't already a guardian, such as a parent, grandparent, step-parent, adult sibling, or even a non-relative, can apply to become a guardian. So examples of parental responsibilities, and this is from the Family Law Act, is making daily decisions about the child's care, meals, routines, handling daily tasks handling daily tasks, school drop-offs, clean clothes, all the rest of that, making major life decisions like where they're going to go to school, what religion, if any, and then activities such as sporting activities and so forth. And then deciding where the child lives and who they spend time with, applying for passports, assessing information about the child, e.g., speaking with teachers. So, it's guardianship, pretty much you have the control over the child. There is an important note for kinship caregivers. If a kinship caregiver applies to the court for guardianship not with CFD, the child or youth will no longer qualify for Ministry of Children and Family Development, outer care programs or benefits. So you need to think about it for sure. Okay, custody. Under the CFCSA, custody includes care and guardianship of the child. Under the Family Law Act, the term custody has largely been replaced with guardianship, which is the legal authority over a child, parenting responsibilities, which is decision-making, power on health, education, and upbringing, and parenting time, scheduled when the child spends time with each parent. So who can apply for custody or guardianship-related orders? Parents married, divorced, or never married, legal guardians, extended family, which is grandparents and relatives, and MCFD, if a child's safety is at risk. So there's different types of custody under the CFCSA, which is the Child Protection Act. Continuing custody order, which is a permanent placement of child under the care of the director. There's a temporary custody order, which is a short-term placement for a specific period, possibly extended or changed later. Interim order, which is a temporary decision while a case is being decided. And then there's a permanent transfer of custody to sections 5401, 541, which allows custody to be transferred to somebody other than the child's parent before or after continuing custody order.
Okay, kinship care. When a child or youth is unable to live with their parent or parents, it's best if they live with someone they know. This is referred to as kinship care. Kinship care supports a child or youth to live with extended family members or other adults they know or whom they have a cultural or a traditional connection to. It is a formal term for traditional care that many Indigenous communities and cultures have valued and practiced either when parents are unable to care or as a collective approach to child rearing. Kinship care, sometimes referred to by ministry as out-of-care agreements, is preferred for children and youth who cannot remain in their parental home because it keeps them connected to family, community, and culture. Kinship care may be a part of the plan created between family or community and the Ministry of Children and Family Development and an Indigenous Child and Family Services agency if a child or youth cannot live with their parents. Next, we'll talk about foster care. Foster care is a temporary placement of children with licensed caregivers who are typically not related to the child when their biological family cannot provide a safe environment. The Child Family Community Services Act is the provincial legislation that provides the legal authority for child welfare services in BC, including foster care. The standards for foster homes must be administered and interpreted within the context of this act. For Indigenous children, the law prioritizes placement with Indigenous foster families or ensures sustained connections to their culture and community. Bill C-92 and the Indigenous Child Welfare Act guide the ministry to consult Indigenous communities and seek culturally appropriate placements. Foster care is intended as a temporary arrangement. Unlike kinship care, which is family-based and often more permanent, foster caregivers do not automatically hold guardianship or custody rights, but provide day-to-day care under ministry supervision.
Adoption. The definition for adoption is a legal process that permanently transfers parental rights and responsibilities from a child's birth parent to the adoptive parents. The child becomes the full legal member of the new family. And it is governed by the Adoptions Act, so it's not by the CFCFA or the Family Law Act. It's a separate act completely. For Indigenous children, Bill C-92, Section 35 of the Constitution also apply. These ensure Indigenous rights and community involvement and cultural continuity are respected. And the goal for adoption is to provide lifelong stability and security while preserving the child's cultural identity, especially for Indigenous children. So the Kinship Care Helpline, that's put on by PSS, Parent Support Services. And the Kinship Care Helpline is there to answer your legal and financial questions with experienced advocates with a lot of lived experience. And I recommend giving them a call if anything pops up that you need, because they're good at what they do.
Okay, now we're all about advocacy, and it's all about our next slide, which will be Gail's.
So our story begins with family, 4 grown children, 2 wonderful grandchildren, and a journey we never expected to take. Our granddaughter was raised by her mum and dad, but our grandson's story, our advocacy story, began long before he was even born. He is now a young man of 21, but he came into our lives as an infant through a MCFD removal, and we subsequently applied for and received financial support on the CIHR Kinship Program. We could never have imagined how deeply that experience could shape our lives. And it's my story of love, persistence, and advocacy. A story about finding your voice when the system doesn't quite know what to do with families like ours. Next. My advocacy journey began years before our grandson's birth. Our daughter, who had suffered a brain injury at age 11, had long struggled with mental health and addiction. We did try everything: treatment, counseling, family support, but nothing seemed to hold, and I really felt powerless to get her the help she so very obviously needed. When she became pregnant, she moved back home, and we thought it might be a turning point for her to get and stay sober. Her partner joined her, and for a while it seemed to be okay. He even regained work in the Alberta oil fields. But soon the signs returned and the old patterns of addiction crept back in. And that's when we realized we had to act, not just as parents, but as protectors of the life that was about to enter the world. Next slide. So, making the phone call to the Ministry of Children and Family Development was one of the hardest things that we've ever done. And it seemed to be the right thing to do. And looking back, I do think it was the only way forward. Our daughter's safety and our unborn grandson's future had to come first. During her pregnancy, she was under psychiatric care, taking medications for anxiety and bipolar disorder, as well as self-medicating. She, in her own way, was really trying her best. When our grandson was born, he tested positive for cocaine and marijuana. At that time, in 2004, they did not test for alcohol. MCFD decided to take custody, and it was a heartbreaking moment for our family. We were determined he would stay within our family, not just for us, but also for my daughter. 4 days later, he came home to us, and that day marked the start of our kinship care journey and a new chapter of advocacy through the lens of love and responsibility. The years that followed were filled with hearings, reports, and endless paperwork. Both parents fought to regain custody, even though they could not or would not take the steps required to be a safe, responsible parent for a young child with special needs. So we fought to keep our grandson safe. Our daughter ended up in a Vancouver Island Health Authority brain injury support home for some of this time. It took about a decade before finally a judge reviewed the full picture, including a neuropsych report confirming that our grandson lives with FASD, and granted us permanent guardianship. The judge also felt that we should have the ability to require supervised visits. After the court decision, our daughter started rebuilding her life. She got sober, stabilized on her medications, and over time moved into her own small apartment. She was able to rebuild her relationship with her son. By the time he turned 12, visits were no longer supervised. Unfortunately, our daughter will always struggle with the effects of her brain injury, her bipolar disorder, and addiction issues. Our grandson decided to stay with her after graduation, but after a few months returned home. His mother, who he loves dearly, can be difficult to be around. Next slide. We realized very early on how important the early intervention would be for our grandson. So what did we do? We took any help that was offered. We were flagged by our local health authority and entered the early childhood program. They suggested speech therapy when he turned 3. He had very few words, and those were really hard to understand. Apparently, his auditory processing was off kilter. By grade 5, we'd hired a private speech and language pathologist who, over a year of weekly sessions, helped him to hear and process common word sounds. We didn't do it alone. His daycare providers, his school, the key worker program, his tutors, public and private therapists were all there every step of the way, working with us to help him move forward. And something I stood firm on, if a therapy or a therapist didn't feel right for us, I didn't stick with it. There was no point pushing on with something that wasn't working. I kept searching for the right fit because having the proper support meant everything for his well-being. And honestly, once we switched to private care, things got a bit easier to manage. When we realized going private was really our only option, we just accepted it and moved ahead, no looking back, just focusing on what our grandson needed most. At that time, we were receiving a small amount from the CIHR program and his Canada Child Benefit that had his disability tax credit added to it as well. And we had decided that all of those funds were earmarked for whatever he needed. Earlier it was therapies, but later it was more conventional things like guitar lessons, math tutoring, air cadets, CrossFit instead of Taekwondo. And they were all therapeutic, even though they seemed more normal and conventional. Of course, his speech was just one piece of the puzzle. He had struggles with balance and knowing where his body was in space because of his vestibular system. He could twirl on Grandpa's office chair for half an hour and never get dizzy. Sometimes his sensory system would get completely overloaded. It wasn't simple, so we just kept looking for new strategies and ideas to help him along the way. And one day, another parent shared something that would change everything, an invite to a brain-based developmental workshop. And that's how we met Kimberly Bethel, an incredible physiotherapist. For 2 amazing years, Kimberly worked with both my grandson and me, and she showed us how movement, sensory processing, and relationships all connect. The tools and ideas she gave us stuck, and they made a real difference in how we supported him along the way. So if those years taught us anything, it was early support changes lives, but so does learning to trust your own instincts as a caregiver. School was a whole new battlefield, and I'm sure some of you know what I'm talking about. From preschool onward, he had an individualized education plan and the support of an eclectic bunch of EAs. His list of diagnoses, his alphabet soup, as we called it, was long, from FASD to ADHD to severe peanut allergy. That thankfully meant extra supervision at school. Teachers are case managers of your child's IEP. So if you have a teacher that understands, either through education or experience, what kiddos with sensory processing issues need, that year might be wonderful. We are a team. And on the other hand, if you had the opposite, things could develop into either a stalemate or a full-on battle. My experience was the first kind can make a difference in a student's well-being that could last his lifetime. The other was hopefully just a bad year that we needed to pay more attention to. I used a phonics-based computer and hardbook program to teach him reading and support his language and writing skills when the school program at the time was using whole word recognition or sight words, and it was failing him. Our school was first in our district to have a sensory room for kids that needed a sensory break. We invested in private neuropsychology testing, connected with an FASD key worker, attended international FASD conferences, and grew stronger as advocates every year. But beyond all that, he thrived in his own ways. He graduated with his peers, earned a black belt in Taekwondo, played bass guitar in the school band, and made lasting friendships, and now lives semi-independently. He drives, he works, and is planning his next chapter of education. Through it all, other kinship caregivers like yourselves became our greatest source of support. The Grandparents Raising Grandchildren group at Parent Support Services was a lifeline. It reminded us that we were not alone. Together, a group of PSS grannies travelled to Victoria to meet with MCFD officials, a visit that helped create the Kinship Care Helpline. Later, I joined Fairness for Children Raised by Relatives as Vice President, advocating for better financial support and recognition for kinship families across British Columbia. Even now, with my grandson building his adult life, that work continues. Advocacy doesn't end, it just simply evolves. So every family's story is different, but each one carries lessons. What parts of our story resonate most with you? What strategies, insight, or resources might support your advocacy journey? So takeaways from Kinship Caregivers. There's one message I'd leave with you today. It is start early, stay open, and never stop learning. This path can feel lonely at times, but connecting with other kinship families turns struggle into strength. Keep your child's needs at the heart of every decision, celebrate progress, and treat setbacks just as part of the process. Our story wasn't easy, but it was worth every single step. And if we had to do it all over again, we would without hesitation.
Okay, that's community. So just go to the next slide. So this is a slide that we produced that has a bunch of community supports. So I want everybody to know that there are educational and other groups out there. The Belonging Network, the Caring Family Society, the Caregiver Learning Network, and PSSS are all offering free courses for kinship care. So before, when they were doing them specifically maybe for adoption or for foster, but now there is a whole stream for kinship caregiver. We have invaded them because we are the ones that are growing. So kinship care is growing right across this province in such a quick way that it's wonderful that all of these other folks who have been supporting these other individual groupings are now opening up the doors to us. So it's really important that you figure out who these guys all are and to get in touch with them. Family Smart Together Centered is another excellent one for information and counseling for people that have needs. The Foundry is great for kids, and as they get older, I think it goes to 24. Grand Family World is great for grandparents who want to connect with other grandparents. And also, to let you know, the Belonging Network, the Caring Families, and PSS also have group sessions for open sessions on Zoom for kinship caregivers as well. There's Fairness for Children Raised by Relatives. We're going to give ourselves a plug because we would love to have new members. The more members we have, the more our advocacy grows, the more our knowledge base grows. You all have your own stories and you all carry such immense knowledge that it's wonderful That's why we're so thrilled to be here today, to be able to tap into everybody and to let you know that you're not alone. Because we've done a lot of research through Fairness with UBC, and that's one of the big things that comes up is that people feel like they're alone, and we want you to know there's a huge community out there that you can be part of. Also, the Interior Community Services, I've got them on here because in our 2-page resource thing that I'm going to make sure that you all get, they have this incredible, and we've also got it online, there's an incredible handbook that they had from one of their workshops that they've done quite a long time ago that has got a huge amount of different supports in all kinds of areas. Pathways I put on here because it's in a medical care directory. Sounds kind of a little bit out of the scope, but for us that are needing doctors, it allows you to look in your area to try and find a doctor. So, and the other one is the BCCRNs. Although it says it's for senior stopping adult abuse and support, there's also for every single area, you can type in your area and it has multiple supports for everything imaginable in your own district. So it's really, 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 really good. And of course, United Way helps with there's a provincial tuition fee waiver, and there's a learning grant, and there's also a futures grant that United Way sponsors, and that's for kids that are already in the tuition fee waiver program, but who may need a little extra funds, and they can apply for that if they're in the other program. We actually, on Fairness's website, we have a town hall that we did with Teresa DeCula, and she talks all about that. And she also mentioned stuff, and we sort of interact with her talking about the provincial tuition fee waiver and the other things that are available as well. So I just want to give another plug for Fairness and say that we have a lot of resources on our website. So please feel free to go there, and you can also join and become a member. Sorry, I know this isn't that platform. I couldn't refuse. I couldn't resist. I mean, okay, so next slide is we're going on to Gail.
Each year, Fairness for Children Raised by Relatives hosts a gathering to bring kinship caregivers together and really to remind us that we're not alone in this journey. And we hear it time and again, many caregivers feel isolated in the role. These gatherings give us a chance to connect, to learn from one another, and to share support in a safe and welcoming space. Over the past few years, we've held 4 gatherings across the province, and each one has been a little different, but always full of heart. Thanks to grants and community partnerships, we've been able to cover the accommodations, meals, and some of the travel costs, as well as some of the daycare costs as well, so that more caregivers can attend. We also ask folks to share rooms or carpool when possible, and honestly, that's often where the best friendships start. So one of the powerful parts of our gathering is what we call sharing stories. It's where caregivers speak openly about their journeys, sometimes for the very first time. And there is laughter, and there are a lot of tears, and there's always this deep sense of connection that fills the room, and is really beautiful to witness. Alongside the stories, we share practical support strategies, little things people can take home and try with their families. This year in Campbell River, we were joined by some wonderful organizations: Parent Support Services, the Belonging Network, the Caring Family Society, and an FASD key worker, who each shared how they were helping kinship families across the province. We also had Dr. Barbara Lee from UBC lead a World Cafe discussion as part of our ongoing partnership with the university. Together, we're working towards creating a new learning module for social work students and for kinship caregivers, something that will help future social workers and caregivers better understand kinship families by 2026. We are so grateful to everyone who make these gatherings possible, our volunteers, our partners, and of course, all of you caregivers who grow up, share, and support one another. And I'm happy to share that our next gathering will be held in Vernon on September 19th and 20th, 2026. So next fall. All kinship caregivers are welcome, or maybe we will see some of you there. And I know we'll see some of you there because we see you there every time. So, so it doesn't matter where you are coming from. I'm from the island and I'm going to Vernon. You may be up north, you can come to Vernon. It's as easy as that. Just come. Thank you for being part of this community and for everything that you do for the children that you care for. So thank you.